The 2022 South African Rally Raid Championship drew to a close early in November during one of the wettest and wildest weekends of cross-country racing in memory. We braved the rain and mud to bring you the following highlights from the Parys 400 in proud partnership with Toyota, Ford, Gulfstream and Pirelli. Welcome to the Free State town of Parys, normally an inviting tourist spot on the banks of the Vaal River. But on the weekend of the 11th and 12th of November, the area was blessed with some of the most intense rain the SARRC has ever had to contend with. This turned the entire Parys 400 route into a quagmire, with the race organisers forced to curtail the action at various points over the weekend. The DSP itself, set at the Parys airfield, became nearly impassable, turning the race HQ into a slip-sliding experience. Despite this, there was an air of expectancy about the event, which served as both round 6 and 7 of the 2022 season. But before we get into the details of the race, let's take a quick look at the championship standings after 5 rounds. The season to date has offered a variety of terrains, surfaces and weather. This is partly what makes the SARRC so challenging, and winning a championship here is proof of a driver's overall skill set. Starting with the special vehicles, it was Tim Howes who had wrapped up the title with 2 rounds to spare. Louis Duprier was in second, with Trace Pricemoor in third. In Class P, it was Quinton Lessing comfortably in the lead. He had Keith McNetty and Guy Henley behind him. Werner Mostert had the lead in the Class Gs, followed by Jeff Minott and Glenn Turon. Over in the production category, it was the youngster Jaden Els topping the Class T charts, with Christo Rose in second and Johan van Staden in third. Els just needed to finish to win the title. Lars Trethewey effectively ran away with the championship this year, holding a healthy lead over both Ernst Roberts and Malcolm Koch. The hotly contested Class T1 saw Ibn Basson in the lead, well clear of Daniel Schroeder in second and Gary Berthold now in third. This is Basson's first full season in the sport, and the businessman was showing off his talent by besting some of the most experienced drivers in the field. And finally, on to the big boys in Class T1 Plus, where it was an all TGRSA affair at the top of the standings. Janelle de Villiers held a 1-point advantage over Lotachan in the class, with Variawa in third. Interestingly, Lotachan was ever so slightly ahead in the overall production category, but either way, things were definitely tight between them with just 2 rounds to go. The fact that those 2 rounds would take place over 2 consecutive days during the wettest weekend Parys had ever seen in decades made it all the more challenging for the crews, especially those who had championship aspirations. We caught up with some of the main players. Tim Howes had already wrapped up the title, but he was back in the Class A BAT Spec 4, ready to take on the competitors as well as the elements.
Yeah, it's going to be a very tough weekend. It's obviously horrific conditions, but it's the same for everyone, so we've got to just get to the finish, and hopefully there's a trophy at the end for us.
Werner Mostert is a stalwart of the Class Gs, having won the championship before. Now partnered with son Ian, the pair found themselves on the brink of their first title together.
I'm very excited for this race. I hope I can bring home a first place.
A championship title was also winking at Jaden Els, who was in the lead in Class T, and the youngster knew exactly what he had to do at the Parys 400.
We just have to finish today. Doesn't matter what the result is, just to get it to the end, to secure the points, and then it looks like we'll have it in the bag.
Big Lars Trethewey was also in command of his title fight and ready to take on the slippery route.
We've got to finish, so I think with the weather we've got today, it's going to be a bit challenging, but it's the same for everybody. I'm looking forward to it.
Ibn Basson had had a stunning season to date. The Class T1 driver had a lead of 44 points going into the final weekend, which meant he wasn't quite in the clear, but was on the brink of his first title.
We have to get this one in the bag today to get a championship, so it's important for us to get a finish today.
And finally, in Class T1 Plus, the eternal battle between Ford and Toyota turned into a bit of a non-affair this year. Even so, the boys in blue were ready for a fight despite the atrocious weather. Oh, and Lance Woolridge's mustache? A temporary fixture in support of Movember.
Yeah, it's a little bit wet, so I think it's going to be a crazy day for all of us. I think just going into survival mode.
For defending champion Henk Lotachan, there was plenty to play for this weekend. The TGRSA driver knew he had his teammate to beat, or relinquish the crown to Janelle de Villiers.
It's actually quite nice getting it down to the last weekend. Brings a bit more excitement into it, and yeah, We're hoping for a good race. I think it's going to be about survival this weekend.
As for de Villiers, he'd have a shot at winning his 4th cross-country title, but the odds were stacked against him. Not only were the conditions a stern test, but his regular navigator Dennis Murphy would have to sit the final weekend out after breaking his arm. Veteran co-driver Rodney Burke stepped into the hot seat and seemed happy to cope with the pressure of guiding de Villiers to a possible championship title.
Yeah, no pressure, hey? It's the way I like it, flat taps, and let's go for the big one.
The plan for the Friday's racing in Parys was to start with a short Pirelli qualifying race, which would take place over a 12-kilometre distance. This would then be followed by 2 longer race loops of 150 kilometres each. But Mother Nature had other plans, especially in terms of the main event. As for the Pirelli qualifier, it was delayed somewhat, but eventually it was time to start the penultimate qualifying race of the year. To say the conditions were tricky would be selling it short. But then that became the entire theme of the weekend. But despite the damp weather, the action on the stage was still pretty hot. Life in a special vehicle can be tough at the best of times, but in weather like this, driving something without a windscreen is just bonkers. The lads in Class G had a tough time out in the qualifying race, but even so, Glenn Turon and Craig Galvin went 3rd fastest in their G77 Can-Am Maverick. They were 1 minute and 5 seconds off the winning pace, but certainly in the mix. The Mostards were ahead of them, just 24 seconds off the leaders, despite the conditions. And pole position? Well, that went to newcomer Gideon Jacobs and Richard Vardy Jr., also in a Can-Am Maverick.
It was good fun. It was slippery as hell, so still a lot of racing to go, but yeah, it was good fun.
In Class A, Sandra Labuskakny-Jonk and husband Jaco posted a time just 2 minutes and 13 seconds behind pole setters Trace Price-Moore and Sean Braithwaite. Between 1st and 3rd came Luke Dupria and Chris Visser Jr., neatly sandwiched.
Yeah, in the specials this rain, it's hard.
In the production category, Hendrik and Heinrich Duplessis ruled the Class T roost, having set a time of 9 minutes and 32 seconds. The father and son pairing of Johan and Sean Van Staden followed 20 seconds back, with would-be champion Jaden Els and co-driver Armand de Toy just 5 seconds further back in 3rd place. Class T 1.2 saw Simon Murray and Kim Bergman go 3rd fastest in their Hilux Turbo, some 2 minutes and 44 seconds off the lead. Dieldorf Rabadar and Johan de Toy were 2nd fastest, just 32 seconds off the winning pace, which was set by Lance Strathuri and Leonard Kramer in their mighty CR6.
Yeah, it was nice. It was enjoyable. I think it's going to be a little bit testing now. We're 2nd car on the road, but you know, it's the same for everybody, and we have to come and race. So I'm looking forward to it.
On to the lads in Class T1, where Fischer and Bertus Blicknort posted the 3rd fastest time in their Team Hilux Rally Raid Hilux, just 9 seconds behind the crew in 2nd place. This spot belonged to Chris Visser and Blukkies Fenter in their Revo, who ended up just 19 seconds behind Eben Masson and Leander Pinar. The championship leaders set a time of 8 minutes and 25 seconds, giving them the best possible shot at sealing the 2022 title.
It wasn't too bad at all, but I think we need to get focused and it's just try to keep it neat and tidy, don't go off the road.
And finally, at the very head of the field came the monstrous machines in Class T1+. The TGRSA squad has proven the crew to beat on multiple occasions this year, and in Parys, this was again the case. Once the mud had been churned during the qualifier, it was Lodachan and Cummings in 5th, with Bottrell and Vasey Lyle in 4th. Next came de Villiers and stand-in co-driver Rodney Burke, who set the 3rd fastest time, just 15 seconds off the pole setter's time. 2nd place belonged to brothers Johan and Werner Horn, who were just 6 seconds behind TGRSA's Shimir Variawa and co-driver Donny Stassen, who went fastest of all, setting a time of 8 minutes and 1 second.
I'm quite surprised we got pole, but it's okay. Luckily we draw now, and I'll probably draw further down the line. We'll probably lose direction, but we'll know where we're going.
So let's quickly recap. In Class A, it was Moore from Dupria with Labuskakny-Jonk in 3rd. Lessing and Acton were fastest in Class P. Class G had Turon in 3rd with Moffitt in 2nd and Jacobs leading the pack. The Duplessis were at the head of Class T with the Van Stadens in 2nd and Els in 3rd place, just 25 seconds covering the top 3. In Class T 1.2, Trathuri led Van Bredar and Murray, whilst Besson had the upper hand in Class T1. He had Visser and Blicknort behind him in yet another close battle. And in Class T1+, it was Variawa from the Horns, with de Villiers in 3rd. And that wrapped up the penultimate qualifying race of 2022. The weather was challenging, but the competition was fierce. So join us after the break for all the action from the main race at round 6, as well as round 7 of the 2022 SARRC in Parys. Welcome back to the Parys Airfield, home of the penultimate and final rounds of the 2022 South African Rally Raid Championship. The quaint little town is normally abuzz with activity, but this weekend was different. As you've already seen, qualifying was an intense affair with crews fighting for survival. The total race distance was planned for nearly 400 kilometers, like every other race on the calendar, but the majority of the race route was deemed impassable, forcing the organizers to reduce the loop to just 70 kilometers. One by one, South Africa's best racing drivers in high-tech racing machines set off into the unknown. Chris Visser and Albertus Venter were the first ones in the Redline Revo, followed by the Class T1.2 rear-wheel drive Century Racing CR6 of Lance Trathui and Leonard Kramer. Next up, the Class T1 Plus TGRSA Hilux of the Hopefuls, Henk Klaverkan and Brett Cummings. In fact, it looked like a Toyota parade, with several more Hiluxes setting off into the wet Free State fields. TGRSA teammates Bottrell and Vasey Lyle were next, followed by De Villiers and Burke, and the fourth TGRSA Hilux with Varioa and Stassen behind the wheel. The Team Hilux crew of the Horn brothers were the next ones to drop the clutch, ahead of the first of the special vehicles driven by Louis Dupria and Chris Visser Jr. The start line looked like a who's who of cross-country racing, with Class T1 title hopefuls Eben Besson and Leander Pienaar starting in 9th, just ahead of the two Class T1 Plus Castrol Ford cross-country rangers of brothers Lance and Gareth Woolridge, with Alvin Vonk and Boyd Dreyer reading the notes respectively. With conditions as dire as they were, it was always clear that round 6 of this championship was going to be an eventful one, and it was about to get even worse. With nearly 40 crews all fighting the conditions and one another, it was going to get messy. After more than an hour and a half of slip-sliding action, some of the leading cars appeared out of the rain and returned to the mud hole that was called the designated service park. These were some of the best drivers the country has to offer, but the conditions were so treacherous, the organisers had no choice but to call it a day. Round 6 would be declared a race, albeit a short one, and this is how they ended. In the category for special vehicles, only 7 crews managed to reach the finish, proving just how tough it was, with several top crews failing to finish. Class A champions Tim Howes and Gary Campbell were the last of the specials to complete the race, albeit in 7th place and 3rd in class after getting stuck. Howes was beaten to the flag by pole setter Louis Dupria and Chris Visser Jr. in the Farmers Meat Striker, a full 41 minutes slower than eventual Class A and special vehicle category winner Trace Price-Moore and Sean Braithwaite, who earned a well-deserved victory. It was almost unthinkable that one can take on the elements in an open wheeler with no windscreen, such as the Can-Am Mavericks in Class G, but this is exactly what these guys did. Title hopefuls, the Mostards, with father Werner and son Ian reading the notes, just missed out on the podium. Motonetics Racing teammates Gideon Jacobs and Richard Vardy failed to convert their pole position into a race win, but still managed a podium finish just 3 minutes slower than eventual second-placed Francois de Witt and Ewald van Rensburg. 3 minutes and 7 seconds was all that stood between de Witt and a maiden class victory, but it wasn't to be as Glenn Theron and Craig Galvin emerged victorious. They were happy, to say the least.
Jeez, it feels amazing, eh? And this one's special. I tell you, we dug deep.
Podium celebration was a wet affair, mixing in some bubbly with the mud, but it was bittersweet for the ones who got to stand on the podium. And here's the confirmation of the ones who did end up on the final results in the special vehicle category. Trace Price-Moore took Class A ahead of Dupria and newly crowned champion Timmy Howes. Class G belonged to Theron over de Witt and Jacobs, whilst Mostert kept his title hopes alive in 4th. The category for production vehicles can get a little complicated, with dozens of crews competing in no less than 4 different classes. Class T saw a great battle between youngster and title hopeful Jaden Els, with Armin de Toy reading the notes in the King Price Extreme Duster, and old dog Johan van Staden and son Sean in the KEC Racing Duster. With Els failing to finish and van Staden taking the win, it meant this title fight would go down all the way to the wire.
But yeah, difficult route. I haven't seen a weight race like this for many years.
Out of the several Century Racing CR6 buggies that normally grace us with their presence in Class T1.2, only 3 rocked up in Parys, with only 1 managing to reach the finish line in the shortened race. And it was none other than the big dog, Lance Trathui and Leonard Kramer in the King Price Extreme car. The big man was happy to say the least, as this win was enough to clinch yet another title.
And yeah, it was a good event, and I enjoy the wet. You know, so this is our 3rd championship now, and yeah, I'd just like to thank Skalk for everything he does for us. And without people like him, we can't race.
And on to Class T1 we go. It is the class with the most cars and therefore extremely competitive, with several crews fighting it out in a variety of cars, such as the Redline Revos, the Redline VK56s, Nissan Navaras, and a string of Toyota Hiluxes. Eben Besson and Leander Pienaar have been at the front of the field most of the season, but here in Parys they simply had to score some points to clinch the title, and that's exactly what they did. 6th for Besson behind veteran racer Gary Berthold and Jean Moore. Berthold described the conditions as the worst he has seen in more than 100 appearances. Richard Leake and Rickers Fourie recorded a fine 4th place in their Leake Motorsport race car, but missed out on a podium position to Nick Pienaar and Carl Swanepoel, who survived the tough conditions to claim 3rd in class. The name of Chris Visser will always be at or very near the top of the result sheets. On this occasion, the veteran and former champion, with Blickies Venter reading the notes from the inside of the Redline Revo, had to settle for 2nd place. Visser came up a few seconds short behind Johan de Bruin, who claimed his maiden victory since swapping tar for dirt at the beginning of the season. It was a popular win for the Pretoria-based businessman.
Really awesome feeling. I think nobody's more surprised than me to be up here.
De Bruin may have claimed Class T1, but a T1 Plus car would ultimately win the overall race. The question was, which one? There was a gaggle of factory TGRSA Hiluxes, the similar Team Hilux car of the Horn brothers, and the 2 factory NWM Castrol Ford Team Rangers. Not only were all of these crews fighting for a race victory, but the overall championship was still hanging in the balance. Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer finished 6th, just 45 seconds behind older brother Lance, with Alvin Vonk reading the notes. This meant it would be a clean sweep for the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA squad. The Italians Guy Bottrell and Simon Vasey-Lyle completed the race in 4th, around 2 minutes short of the final podium spot. This belonged to Shamir Varawa and Donnie Stassen, who drove a steady race to 3rd place. So it came down to this. The fight for the race was also the fight for the title between defending champions Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings and former multiple champion Janelle de Villiers, with stand-in navvy Rodney Burke reading the notes. De Villiers is an old hand and gave it his all, but in the end he could do nothing to stop Ladergan from claiming the overall victory. Both de Villiers and Ladergan, however, were happy to reach the end.
Yeah, it's very tricky out there. It's more survival than a race. Yeah, it's sad that we couldn't do more racing, but I mean it was getting so tough out there. Even for us right in the front, we nearly got stuck 1 or 2 places, so I can just imagine what it's like for the guys at the back. But yeah, not happy with the result, but yeah, we wish we could have had some more racing.
Usually, the taste of bubbly is bittersweet, but on this occasion it was clear the crews were eager to get dry after a very trying day in the office. And here's the confirmation of Van Staden keeping the Class T title alive with his win. Trathui was the only survivor in the Class T1.2s and a popular first win for Johan de Bruin in the Class T1s, whilst Besson 6 was enough to clinch his title. And 1 minute and 34 seconds is what separated teammates Ladergan and de Villiers at the very top of the standings. And that was that for round 6 of the 2022 SARRC. 1 round still remained, 1 race that stood between several drivers and championship glory. But here's the catch. The venue for the final round would be the same, except it rained for most of the night here in Parys, and the farms in the area were now even more waterlogged than they were before. But even so, as they say, the show must go on, and at 9:30 on the final Saturday of the event, it was go time once again. By now, the organisers and competitors knew what was coming. Yet another tough, albeit shortened event where survival became key. After a short qualifying race, just like the day before, the race proper started, and the remaining 30-odd crews tackled the waterlogged route. Just like the actual race, we'll keep it short and simple. Gareth Woolridge drove superbly to claim pole position in his NWM Castrol Ford Ranger after the short qualifying race, ahead of Shamir Variawa's TGRSA Hilux and the Team Hilux version driven by the Horn brothers, Johan and Werner. But before we tell you how the race and overall championship fight turned out, let's cast our attention to the various battles in the different classes that make up the production car and special vehicle categories of the SA Rally Raid Racing. In the special vehicle category, Trace Price-Moore and Navi Sean Braithwaite added another overall and Class A victory to their wins the previous day, with Louis Dupria and Chris Visser Jr. in the Farmers Meat Striker finishing second overall in the Class A's. It was another real challenge for the open wheel vehicles in Class A, P and in Class G in the treacherous conditions, with these vehicles not having the luxury of windscreens, wipers or windows. Nevertheless, Trace Price-Moore and Braithwaite were happy to reach the finish.
Oh, a good weekend, obviously luck was on our side this weekend. Everyone tried hard and I suppose we picked better lines and yeah, it was good.
After making their SARRC debut at round 6 of the Parys 400 the previous day and finishing third in Class G, Gideon Jacobs and Richard Vardy Jr. in the Motonetics Racing Can-Am Maverick took it one step further to claim the top step of the Class G podium, whilst they also added more silverware to their collection after finishing second overall in the special vehicle category. They were followed by teammates Glenn Turon and Craig Galvin, with the outgoing Class G champions Cecil and Aladis Lani rounding off the class podium. But what a first weekend's worth of racing for Gideon Jacobs.
It was tough again, it was fun, but yes, this last 50 k's were hard. His eyes couldn't stay open, it was mud and hard one.
And here it is, the final opportunity in 2022 for these guys and girls to experience the taste of victory, albeit from a very wet and muddy podium. And proof of Price-Moore's second victory in as many days in Class A, whilst Jacobs scored a maiden win in Class G in only his first weekend of national racing. And for the final time in 2022, we cast our attention to the various battles in the production vehicle category. These crews at least have windscreens, but it didn't really make much of a difference in these trying conditions. After failing to complete the race the day before, Jaden Els had some pressure on his young shoulders on the final race of the season. He had to finish, and finish he did. His second place was enough to claim the Class T title for 2022, but he was beaten to the flag on the day by rivals Johan and Sean van Staden.
Yeah, it was survival. You had to just choose the right lines and keep your eyes closed in some points and hope you're going to make it through. But yeah, like a race, and the navigation was spot on.
Class T 1.2 saw an identical result as the day before, with Big Dog Lance Trathui storming to yet another victory, cementing his championship in the process. The King Price Extreme driver had every reason to smile after surviving this tough race in his powerful two-wheel drive buggy.
It was a great weekend, the guys did a great job marking it. It's unfortunate the weather, but I mean there's nothing we can do about that. But yeah, looking forward to next year.
In the highly competitive Class T1s, the Redline crew of Philip Witter and Rudolf Janssen van Rensburg continued their perfect finishing record by once again reaching the end, this time in a fine 5th place overall. There was more reason to smile in the Redline camp as Dubai-based driver Thomas Bell and SA lad Wade Harris reached the finish line in 4th, whilst 3rd was more than enough to cement the title in the Team Rally Raid Hilux for Eben Besson and Leander Pinot. And more good news for Redline, with Johan de Bruin and Gerrit Skitter following up their win from the day before with yet another podium, second on this occasion. So the Class T1 win went to none other than the wily old fox Chris Visser and Blicky Sventer in yet another Redline car, the Revo in this case. Needless to say, the Freiburg farmer was pleased.
But yeah, the car was good today, and yeah, the team was excellent, and yeah, I just want to thank everybody that contributed to this. It was very good.
Just 2 more questions needed to be answered. Who would win the race? And secondly, who would be crowned the overall champion in 2022? Chances were that it could come from the same crew, but it turned out not to be the case in Parys. Defending champions and points leaders Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings' hopes of adding another title would drown halfway through the day when the alternator belt came unstuck, forcing them to pull over. This opened the door for SA veteran Janelle de Villiers to sneak through and claim his second place in as many days. But more importantly, it was enough to earn him yet another SA title to add to his long list of motorsport achievements.
Thanks to my team, I mean they did a great job. The car was brilliant, the Hilux was very strong. I mean in conditions like these I don't want to drive anything else, so yeah, brilliant, nice day at the office.
Unfortunately for both Shamir Variawa and Lance Woolridge, their races also ended prematurely in the mud, and with de Villiers claiming second, it meant a very popular and well-earned first victory of the season for the NWM Ford Castrol Ranger crew of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer, who drove the perfect race to claim a flag-to-flag victory. A great way to end the season.
Really chuffed. I must say Boyd was phenomenal today. He called everything early. He didn't make a single mistake.
Victory bubbly for all the various class winners in the production vehicle category and confirmation of how the final event on the 2022 calendar ended. Victory for the Van Stadens in Class T, whilst Trethewey dominated the Class T1.2s. Class T1 was all about Chris Visser, while the second overall was good enough for Janelle de Villiers to be crowned South African champion for the umpteenth time. But the final victory of 2022 belonged to Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer in their Ford. The 2022 Parys 400 will be remembered as the wettest race in almost 2 decades and brought back memories of the Carnival City 400 back in 2003, while it was more than likely the first time in the history of the modern racing series that the organisers were forced into the extreme changes to the race and the route. Although it was a challenging way to round off the 2022 SA Rally Raid Championship, it definitely added to a highly successful and memorable season. All the wet, muddy and slippery action was brought to you by Ford, Toyota, Gulfstream and Pirelli.